Welcome back to the Ghost Bunny podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Marquardt, with a brand new episode for you guys. My guest today is Wes Lesley. Wes is the founder of the Haunt Ghost Tours, which has captivated over 40,000 guests with top-rated tours in 4 California cities. A Bay Area native who discovered his passion for the paranormal in New Orleans, Wes has appeared on Ghost Adventures and been a speaker at Midsummer Scream, presenting on ghost tour research and design. Before launching The Haunt, he founded Wild SF Tours, leading tours about San Francisco, culture, food, ghosts, music, graffiti, and social movements. He moved to LA to pursue his pop music and expand The Haunt, and has since launched Solvang and Temecula as well. When not doing tours or music, Wes bartends and organizes pop-up culture nights with live music from up-and-coming LA musicians. Wes, thank you so much for doing the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I am too. I think it's cool that you do these pop-up bars because it's like 2 different forms of spirits.
There we go. Yeah, it's funny. There's a couple of ghost tours I've seen out there that are called like Spirits and Spirits, or
Yeah.
there's another name that's like it. I'm blanking on it, but yeah. Anyways, it's a fun overlap, and I should do more of that kind of stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think so too, because I mean, I know it's not for everybody, but I feel like having a little cocktail, like being able to have fun and do the ghost stuff is kind of letting loose, and it kind of makes people a little bit more open-minded and
That's it.
relaxes you, you know?
Yeah, there's a reason why every ghost tour in New Orleans, people are carrying a drink around while they walk.
That's true. That's totally true. But I also feel like for some people, because so I did this once. So I did, I don't know if you know Scott Michaels from Dearly Departed Tours.
Yeah.
Scott and I go way back. We've been friends for a long time. And I did just like some one-off tours with him where I picked the places that we went to, and we sold tickets, and then everybody, we just went on this like specialized Bridget ghost tour.
Nice.
And beforehand, I made this special cocktail. I forget what I called it, but it was like the ghostini or something like that. And it's interesting because some people are really good about it, and then other people go overboard about it.
That happens. I mean, there have been nights, I've been doing these tours for 11 years. And there have been like a few nights where we've had to kick people off that are just like way too far gone, where I'm just like, hey, I think you're going to have more fun just hanging out at a bar for the rest of the night. And they're like, no, I want to have fun. It's like, all right, like we're trying to like walk that, that line of like letting people be loose, but also like we want to have some like reverence and respect for what we're doing. Cause like there are
Right.
nights that I think that we might actually be contacting an actual spirit or a ghost, and it's like I want us to be showing up with like a really good energy and not like drunkenly taunting somebody on the other side. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's where it becomes like this interesting balance. It's like you want this to be fun and have a good time, but at the same time, we also are doing something that does require respect. And so it's just that balance, that fine line. But I think it's there somewhere. It's just hard to navigate it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny with the tours. There's a few things to balance. On the other side, like there are people that are like serious, legit ghost hunters, and then there are families looking for something to entertain their kids, or there's couples looking for something kind of campy and fun to do. And it's like trying to find that balance is something that's interesting. We don't get a lot of bad reviews, but occasionally we'll have people that are like, this was too campy and not, serious enough, or like, oh, this felt really like scary and it scared my kids because it was too real, So it's like trying to find that sweet spot is an ongoing, consideration.
Yeah, because that's another thing I was going to mention in here too, is that it's got to be hard to find the balance of like adding comedy to it, because I think comedy is important, but then also like making sure you have the correct historical facts, and then somebody who can deliver that, and you want it to be spooky because it's a ghost tour after all.
Yeah.
So like trying to fit all that in and make everybody happy with it has got to be hard.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have been on ghost tours, and a lot of ghost tours do have a comedic element to it. And I think like we've found that our best tour guides aren't necessarily historians or professional ghost hunters. They're the ones that have gone through improv or stand-up comedy training and are just good at thinking on their feet and making fun and magical moments. And what I've found is that humor is good too, because you kind of bring it up and then people are just, laughing, and then all of a sudden you bring it down when something really creepy happens, and you can see it on the guide's face where you're like, oh, he's not smiling anymore. Something happened here. Where all of a sudden, like, I'll get freaked out, and they're like, oh wait, this might be legit all of a sudden, and it makes those moments more impactful, I think.
Yeah, I like it too because with the comedy, it kind of breaks it up. So if somebody's not like if there's a skeptic or something on the trip or whatever, that kind of gives them something too. But
Yeah.
I think that having that energy, where you're laughing and you're letting go a little bit, and I feel like that energy raises the chances of the possibility of something happening on the tour.
I think so. That makes sense. I mean, people are just, if they're laughing, that means that they're open minded and they're receptive to what's happening, and that's when like the magical moments occur.
Yeah. How often would you say, I mean, I know you're not on all the tours, but I'm assuming that people report back to you. How often would you say that people experience something on a tour?
On our tours, more often than like most other ghost tours out there, I would say, because we're really trying to conjure things up. Like we do, summoning spells at the beginning. We give everyone EMF meters to carry around. So they're all like kind of looking for evidence themselves. And then we're taking them to known haunted locations with a bunch of other gear that we'll pull out if we start getting anything using like dowsing rods or a spirit box or a pendulum. So it's like we're doing all this to try and like get things to show up as opposed to just standing outside of a building saying like, here's what did happen here at one point.
Right.
So, and at the end of the day though, it's like, I don't think every single tour there's like a ghost waiting for us at the building that wants to like pop up and communicate. But, we try the tools almost every night just to see if anything happens. And I would say like, I don't know, maybe 10% of the time, like things happen that feel like deeply unexplainable. I would say
Wow.
like, most tours there's like something that happens, but maybe it's like the street light always flickers in this one spot. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's just an old street light. Or if we always get EMF activity at this corner, I'm like, oh, it's because we're standing on top of this power box. Like that all makes sense. But then when I have those moments that I can't debunk, where we've never seen that happen in that spot before, or where like three people on the tour all feel the same chill run through them at the same moment, or I say, this woman's name and everyone's EMF spikes every single time that I say her name. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, that's when I'm like, maybe something's going on here. Let's investigate and see if she wants to talk to us.
Yeah. Well, I should start out by saying how I found you. I saw a reel, and I can't remember if it was on Instagram. It might have been Instagram or TikTok or something where somebody was doing a Solvang ghost tour. And I
Yep.
was like, oh my God, because I was initially intrigued because I've been to Solvang a few times, and the last time I was there, I actively was looking for, and it's been a few years now, but I was looking for ghost stories or haunted places there and stuff, and there wasn't just a lot of information. Oh, and before I go any further, I should explain to the listeners who aren't from California what Solvang is. Solvang is the cutest little town here in, I guess it would be considered it's the coast. It's on the coast. Is it Central California or is it?
In the comments right now on that reel, there's a big debate raging whether it's Central Coast, Central California, or Southern California. But
Is there? Yeah, because it's.
yeah, but it's I consider it SoCal. Someone said, technically you get the SoCal Disneyland discount if you live in Solvang.
Oh,
So
you do.
yeah, so apparently it's SoCal for that reason. But it's near Santa Barbara on the coast.
Yeah, and not far from the Madonna Inn, which is one of my favorite places.
Love that place. Yeah,
But the Solvang is a Dutch town, and everything, all the
Danish.
architecture. Oh, Danish.
Yeah.
Sorry, everything, all the architecture is Danish, and they have a windmill. Like everything's just super cute, and all of that adds to like the visual of this cute little town. And they have like the little pubs and cheese tasting. And if you guys are familiar with the Kardashian gingerbread houses, there's a bakery there that does those for them. They're the cutest things ever. So that's what Solvang is. It's just like an adorable little Danish town.
There you go.
I think I always say Dutch. Always.
Well, I mean, they all have like windmills. It's the same kind of
It
stuff.
all looks the same.
But yeah, I mean, like walking around there, you feel like you're like stepping back in time, and you feel like you're in Europe. Like it's like the whole
Yes.
thing is designed to feel like a 1700s, 1800s Danish village where like they don't allow neon signs, they don't allow like a lot of modern signage. It really like they're trying to keep it really historically accurate.
Yeah.
So it's I mean it's very immersive place. It's like walking onto a movie set, sort of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and if you guys watched Girls Next Door, the episode where I took my sister for her 21st birthday, we stop in Solvang and we do a little wine tasting and we get the little outfits and we you take pictures in the shoe and all the things you do when you're in Solvang. But so I saw this tour and I was like, "Oh my God, I've been waiting for this because I've been looking for ghost stories there in the past and I thought, oh my gosh, since I'm starting back up the paranormal podcast, how visual and amazing that would be. I have to know who does these. So I looked up the tour company and then I found you. And then I found that it's a much bigger picture than that because you have tours in LA, you have tours in Temecula and San Francisco. And I was like, okay, I need to talk to this guy.
Yes. Yeah, just those four towns for now. And Solvang is I'm glad that you saw that reel. That reel's kind of gone a little viral for us. It's got like 400,000 views, which is pretty cool. And it's made the tour a lot busier. And that's one that I just started last year. So it's like it's still pretty new to town. I think everyone in Solvang is really excited about it because there's not much to do at night there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a day trip where people, a lot of people from SoCal will just drive up and like stay there for a night, bring the kids or go on a little couples getaway or whatever. But
Yeah.
like you walk around, you see the town, you think it's cute, go to some bakeries, maybe go to one of the bars or the wineries, and then that's kind of it. So now we're like, there is something to do at night, and it's this like really
Yeah.
fun tour that's a lot of history. So you like learn about the development of Solvang and like why there's a Danish colony in like the coast of California, plus all of the hauntings, which was really fun to research because yeah, as you noticed as well, like it's not a lot of the towns like where we run our tours, there's all these books about historical hauntings and ghosts and stuff. And there's nothing like that in Solvang.
Yeah.
So to design that tour, it was a lot of just interviewing locals and picking their brains and hearing all sorts of really funny stuff where they're like, oh, I don't really know about too much haunted stuff, but my building used to be a mortuary, right? I'm like, no. And he's like, yeah, it was a mortuary, and yeah, I would actually hear some noises. I'm like, okay, well, so that could be a haunting. And
Yes.
then you go to like actually talk to this guy, and then you go talk to him. He's like, yeah, I think my grandpa's ghost, haunts my bakery still. And all of his employees are like, yeah, we've seen his grandpa's ghost. And so like we're just kind of going around amassing these little stories, and then eventually, discovered there was a serial killer in Solvang in the 1970s. And there's just all sorts of stuff. So it was really fun to put this tour together.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You kind of already answered this, but I want to go back to what you said about the community is welcoming because that was going to be one of my questions. Like, is there pushback and people don't want this brought there? Or is there any of that going on? In not just necessarily Solvang, but do you get that from any of the towns?
Not really. Like, I think most people see it as a net positive. They're like, cool, people want to bring more tourism to our town. That's exciting.
Mhm.
Even people that don't care about ghosts or believe in it are like, hey, more nighttime entertainment. This is going to maybe mean that people come to our restaurant beforehand or go to the bar afterwards or something.
Yeah.
We try to like be good community members as well. Like, here in Los Angeles, we operate our tour in Chinatown, which is where I live, and I love Chinatown. And people always just like see me walking around the neighborhoods. They're like, "Oh, that's the ghost guy." But also, we donate money to the Chinese Historical Society, and we like try to show up to their events and things like that, and just find ways to, have the cities see that we're cool and we're locals, and all of our guides like live in the towns where we run the tours. And at the end of the day, we're not like a huge corporation. It's like me running the tours with 2 or 3 tour guides in 4 different cities.
Right. Back to Solvang a little bit. Tell me a good ghost story in Solvang. Just one.
Let's see here. What's one of my favorite ones? I would say, yeah, maybe the story about the bakery. There's this place called Berkholm's Bakery, which is like a really traditional Danish bakery, third generation. All of like the Danish immigrants came over in like the early 1900s, and so the grandpa comes over, opens his bakery, which took off, and now it's passed down to his son, and then his grandson Thomas is running it. Apparently upstairs it used to be maybe a brothel. There's some evidence of that. There were some like secret society meetings happening there at some point, and then the grandpa passes away, and soon after that people start seeing him. There's this huge like industrial mixer in the back that can't turn on by itself for any reason, and it turns on. People will see grandpa upstairs. I talked to not even just like the kids working at the front, but there was this like guy who's been working there for probably 20 years or more. And he was like, yeah, sometimes when I'm washing dishes, I'll see him out of the corner of my eye. And I was like, are you concerned? He's like, no, I'm not scared, but I always have my flashlight with me just to be ready. So
Yeah.
like, the fact that he's still around is cool. Yeah, that's one of my favorites, I would say.
Definitely. That's fun. So, you started this. Well, let's back up a little bit. You are originally from the Bay Area. I'm
Yeah.
from Northern California as well. I grew up in a town called Lodi.
Okay, yeah, I got some family in Lodi.
You do?
Yeah, my aunt and uncle were teaching at Tokay High, if you know
Yeah.
that. Okay, cool, cool.
That's so funny.
Nice.
And then I lived in the East Bay for a little while.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so I grew up in a very scary town. The name is actually quite frightening as well. It's called Pleasanton.
Oh, I know
Sure.
Pleasanton.
There you go. Yeah, I grew up there, and then I moved to San Francisco to go to SF State. Um, and then, yeah, started the ghost tours basically right after college.
I'm curious, did you have paranormal experiences before this, before you went to New Orleans?
Not really. Like I wasn't tapped into that energy and I wasn't looking for it. And I think that the more you're aware of it, the more you start to like notice things that maybe you would otherwise write off as like, oh, that was a weird sound.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden if you're like constantly looking for things like this, I think you become a little bit more attuned to it and maybe pick up on what might be like poltergeist activity or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in San Francisco, I didn't really have a lot of that. And the company that I started at first, we were doing originally it wasn't ghost tours; they were just like neighborhood history, tours about San Francisco. Because my grandpa, on both sides of the family my grandparents are from the Bay Area, and my grandpa on my mom's side was like a bus driver through San Francisco, and my other grandpa owned a clothing store like downtown, and I had an uncle that owned a bar in the financial district. So it's like long rooted history in town. And I just wanted to tell, the history of communities in San Francisco. So that's kind of how we got started. And as a musician, people were like, what about a music tour? So I made a tour about the, counterculture in the 1960s and the Haight-Ashbury. And then people kept on asking, what about a ghost tour? What about a ghost tour? And that, originally wasn't like anything that appealed to me that much. And then I lived in New Orleans and then started seeing things and starting having things happening. And I think for most people that are skeptics about the paranormal, you just have one moment that just kind of is like a little too real and you go, okay,
Yep.
I think there's something else going on out there that science maybe can't explain yet, but I felt it and I'm intrigued now.
Yes, absolutely. I say that too to some people who have never had experience. I'm like, the second you have that first experience, you'll be hooked.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
you're trying to like prove to yourself that happened once and you want that feeling again. There's like a
Yeah.
lot of things that go behind it, but like I feel like once you experience something, you kind of become obsessed with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of
Or
how it was for me.
or too
Oh,
scared.
yeah. I
People
mean, I've seen that too on the tour where people are skeptics and then something really creepy happens to them and they go, yeah, I'm done. I'm done. They like
Yeah.
hand over their EMF meter. They're like, that's
Yeah,
enough for me.
yeah.
But yeah, for me in New Orleans, it was I belonged to this old gymnasium in like in the French Quarter, and it was called like the New Orleans Athletic Club. It's this pretty creepy old like 1800s brick building, kind of like Hogwarts looking. And I would be swimming there. I'm a swimmer, and so I'd be in there like late at night, usually like the last person in the building at like 10 or 11, and I'm swimming, and then out of the corner of my eye one night I saw this guy in like a vintage swimsuit, like a Speedo kind of thing, like swimming past me in the opposite direction. And I was like, I wasn't looking for a ghost, so I was like, oh cool, there's someone else here, like I'm not the last one in. That's kind of exciting to like finally have someone else swimming here. But then I get to the end, I like kind of pull up my goggles to just make sure that he's like not in the same lane as me and I don't run into him, and he was gone. And I was like, okay, he probably went into the locker room. That makes sense, And I'm looking for every logical reason that this person's not there. And then the next night I go back and I'm swimming and I see him again. Again, just like as I'm swimming, just out of the corner of my eye. And then when
Yeah.
I look back, he's gone again. And this just starts to happen pretty consistently when I'm at the pool. And after a while, accept it. I'm not scared by it. I don't think this guy is trying to drown me or anything. He's just more of what you'd call a residual impression,
Yeah.
probably. That's just like a hologram, replaying on loop for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So that is kind of what piqued my curiosity in all of it. And then back in San Francisco, I was like, there's got to be some stories here too. And then I uncovered a lot of it.
Yeah. I'm fascinated. So I've obviously been to San Francisco lots of times because I'm from that area, and my brother used to live there for a while, and I definitely think that there's so much going on there. Like you could
Mm,
just sort of feel it in the city. Not like
yeah.
New Orleans. New Orleans, I feel like the second you are in the French Quarter, there's no doubt that
Yeah.
there's like stuff going on there. I feel like everybody has to feel that. But I feel like San Francisco definitely has its own energy.
I think so too. Yeah. I mean, there's different neighborhoods that, are more historic than others. And so where our tour takes place, we go through this neighborhood called Jackson Square, which is the only like fully intact preserved neighborhood from the gold rush. And so a
Oh,
lot of these buildings are like, like narrow alleyways with these brick buildings from the 1850s. And you feel like you're kind of time traveling to the gold rush. Like when you walk through these streets, you can like basically hear the horses and like you just feel like the excitement of that era.
yeah,
And obviously, the older the buildings are, the more energy may get stuck there over time, and the more likely it is that there's going to be hauntings associated with it. And so, I love walking through that neighborhood for that reason. And that's one of the areas that we tend to get a lot of weird things happening on the tour.
yeah. And then with the 1906 earthquake and everything too, there's got to be some, I would say, energy from that left over.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not to give away too much of the tour, but where the tour ends is outside of this church that was rebuilt from the rubble after the earthquake of 1906, and it feels pretty likely that some of these, clinker bricks they're called, that were from old, buildings that got destroyed, like, could have injured someone or could have taken someone's life from that
Mhm.
era, and like it always feels and it looks like there's a lot of energy and history in these bricks because some of them are actually charred, disfigured bricks when the fires swept through after the earthquake of 1906, and there's a
Yeah.
building built out of that rubble. So that's an area that we try to communicate with, who might have been victims from 1906 by playing a song that they would recognize from a recording from that same year. So,
Oh, yeah,
you
that's
know,
cool.
yeah.
Do you know offhand how many people died in that 1906 earthquake?
It was around 3,000.
Oh,
Which
wow.
is
Even more than
pretty
I
high. I mean,
thought.
it's like all things considered, like it could have been a lot worse because the fires were really, the more destructive thing, but
Yeah.
3,000 is pretty huge numbers, still.
Yeah. Tell me about doing ghost adventures. Where were you? What'd you guys do?
That was fun. I was in San Francisco for this last season. They were doing an episode about Angel Island,
Yes.
which, yeah, for people that don't know it, there's an island. It's kind of right behind Alcatraz in the bay, but it's much larger. And it was called the Ellis Island of the West Coast, um, because that's basically where all the immigration was coming, mainly from people coming from Asia. But there was, it was a military fort before that. And a lot of creepy stuff happens there. There's like a, military hospital with a lot of ghostly activity and just a lot of stuff there. So yeah, they brought me up to talk a little bit about my experiences and just kind of what I know about the island. I think I'm on screen for like 20 seconds in all, but it was a good excuse to get up there and be a part of this and just kind
Yeah.
of meet the crew and hang out with Jay and do this big shoot. So yeah, I mean, obviously for people that love ghosts, Ghost Adventures is kind of the premier place to be watching it. And I think in the paranormal community, some people find it to be cheesy or, maybe getting a little Hollywood embellishment. But I think for a lot of folks, it's the kind of gateway into seeing what paranormal investigations can be. So,
Yeah.
I really respect them for that reason. And just to be able to be a part of it and say, as seen on Ghost Adventures was pretty fun.
Definitely. So you would say it was a pretty positive, fun experience?
Yeah, it was fun. I got some photos with Jay holding up some like the haunt pin, and I gave him one of them. So yeah, that was just cool to be a part of for sure.
Yeah, and then you were a speaker at Midsummer Scream. So before you tell me about this, I just want to tell everyone what Midsummer Scream is. It's a event that takes place in Long Beach every year in the summer. It's usually the last weekend in July, and I love it. I missed it last year, and I have to miss it again this year, and I'm so bummed about it. But it's incredible. So it's a at the Long Beach Convention Center, and there's just like vendors from every aspect of Halloween, horror, haunt, everything in there. So all your favorite people, all your favorite vendors, people that have been in movies, and then my favorite part is they have a whole other area where people who have haunts coming up, they do little mini versions of their haunts so you can get kind of a sneak peek of what the new haunts are going to be for the year. So little mini haunted houses, and there's a bunch of them, like 10 or 12 of them in this one big room, and it's incredible. I love it there. But there'll be like spooky food and spooky clothes and I mean just everything you can imagine. And things I didn't even know existed sometimes. Spooky
Yeah.
soaps and spooky like teacups and everything. It's like a shopping paradise and meeting a lot of those people. It's an incredible experience. But you got to be a speaker there.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't know when we were going to be recording this, so I will be a speaker next weekend. I wrote my bio in anticipation.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, next.
this won't air till way after.
Cool. I figured. Yeah.
So
Oh, yes. So yeah, that's what I'm doing this
so
month.
you're actually doing it this time.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it. I
There
see.
you go.
And you're going to talk about ghost tour research and design, like so how people can start their own tour.
Yeah, basically, I want to like kind of shed light on our approach to like how to craft like a really cool immersive ghost tour because I've been on a lot of really bad ghost tours and I think a lot of people have and they just kind of they can be really dry and boring or like way too detailed and obsessed with like names and dates. It's like we just want to be entertained and have something a little spooky happen.
Yeah.
So I talk about, what kind of like how we approach, doing the research and like finding really cool stories, how to make the tour itself feel really, entertaining in terms of like, all right, it should only be an hour and a half long. Like you don't want to have like a 4 hour long ghost tour. You don't want to walk 3 miles, you don't want to end like super far from where the tour started. Just some of like the basics. And then like our approach to the types of stories we tell. Like we don't do a lot of really like graphic, gory stories. That's just not something that we like, but we like stories that are really, peculiar, like strange ghosts and hauntings or something in like a famous locations. And then we, obviously use ghost tools throughout the tour. So I talk about how to incorporate those and, how to make the experience feel kind of magical.
Yeah. Well, I'm bummed that I'm missing that because I have this secret desire to start a tour in my hometown.
Oh, nice.
And
Wait, in
so
Lodi or where?
yeah, in
Oh,
Lodi.
cool. That'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
I know. And I've researched some ghost stories and everything, but I know there's a lot more. And I would love to take your or listen to your presentation. I'll have,
Yeah, maybe I'll make a copy of it or something. But we should
yeah,
talk. That'd be cool to get a little Lodi ghost tour going.
I think it'd
Be
be
a good
amazing.
excuse to go see my aunt and uncle as well.
Right? One of the things I love is that you give everybody equipment to use, like a K2 meter or, what do you use anything else like the dowsing rods or
Yep, dowsing rods, a spirit box, a pendulum.
and you let
Yeah,
them use it, the guests?
yeah.
Yeah, see, I think that's cool. It makes it more interactive and you feel like you're a part of it and doing something and so exciting if you get a response.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like such a simple thing that makes the experience so much more interactive and engaging for people as opposed to just walking around and hearing stories. It's like, if you're checked out of it for whatever reason, because it's hard to just listen to someone tell you information for an hour and a half straight. It's like
Yeah.
you're not gonna remember most of it. So if you're just like in between stops walking and then all of a sudden you start seeing something, you're like, hey Wes, is this normal? And then I can go, oh yeah, it's because of that thing, or no, let's figure out what's happening. It's like it's a really fun way to make the tour more interactive.
Definitely.
And I've seen like there's a lot, since we started doing that, I've seen a lot more companies that now have EMF readers as either an add-on that you can rent or they just include it. And I feel like that's part of our legacy, and I'm happy about it. It's like, the the better that everyone's ghost tour is, the better it is for the industry as a whole. Because I have a lot of friends that are like, I went on a ghost tour once. It was pretty bad, and it kind of like sours them from trying out more. And I'm like, I want every ghost tour to be amazing, so that when you go to a city, you're like, I know that I'm going to learn a lot of history, see some creepy stuff, have a good time. Maybe get a little spooked. Like,
Yeah.
let's just make ghost tours as good as they can be.
Right. And so much goes into that. I mean, from like you said, the research and planning it, but also having like an amazing guide. Like that's got to be one of the hardest parts is finding somebody who, like you said earlier, can improvise, can, tell the stories, can have humor, but also tell a scary story and
Yeah.
all have all the emotions. I always feel like, and I feel like this with like TV shows or movies or even a podcast or whatever, if you could make people laugh and make people scared or like a little nervous or anxiety or feel sad, and you can do that all in one podcast or TV show or
Mhm.
whatever. When people's emotions are affected like that, I feel like that really draws people in and makes it more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the guides.
Mhm.
When you look at like reviews for any, company, it's like you never hear anything about the company itself. It's always about our guide. Our guide was hilarious, was so sweet, was so funny. And it's funny because you look at the reviews and like people aren't seeing reviews like, oh, he was so creepy or she was so, disturbing. It's like, oh, she was so friendly and nice. And at the end of the day, like that's what people want. It's like they want someone that cares about them. And so, that's like really, really important to us is just our guides being good people, like people that I would actually want to hang out with outside of work, which we do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's another thing too. I read that your reviews are like amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at some of them. I'm like, wow, you guys are doing good. You're killing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've put together like a pretty like comprehensive training. Like I really like, really try to instill like why we do what we do for our tour guides
Mhm.
in like a way that like a lot of other companies I know about don't. They're just like, yeah, here's the script, go out and do whatever you do. And I've met owners that are like, I have no idea what my tour guides do, but they get pretty good reviews, so that's fine. It's like I like to know, I've
Yeah.
like, I'm like you go to these places in this order, and like they have like a lot of leeway in terms of like making it authentic to them, but like I want our tours to be like a pretty high caliber where I can send someone like you on any of our tours and feel confident that you're going to have an awesome time because all of our guides are amazing and funny and good people.
Yeah. Do you actually host some of the tours? Were you saying that you do the ones in LA?
Yeah, we have 4 guides in LA now, and I'm actually leading 2 next week just because everyone's on vacation this summer. So, but I'm not usually leading them, but I'll jump in like once or twice a month to lead them, and it's fun because I'm a performer and entertainer, and I love being in front of people and getting to goof around and tell stories and creep people out. So it'll be
Yeah.
fun.
How often see, I love that kind of stuff. I love to scare people. Like
Yeah.
by telling them a story that really creeps them out or by like making them like I love decorating my house for Halloween and stuff. I love having decorations that people are scared of.
Nice.
I'm so bad at that, but I love it. I
Great.
don't know why. I've loved it since I was a kid, and I remember it was elementary school, and we did a little haunted house in just like one of the little hallways, and I was in charge of it, and I remember being just so into this, like, oh, I'm really gonna scare people with this, and I'm really gonna scare people with this, and I've
Nice.
loved it ever since.
I love that. I love that.
I think that means there's something wrong with me, though.
It means you need to be a tour guide.
Maybe, yeah. So you have kind of a script of the ghost stories and the places you're going to go. How often would you say you get new information and you can change it a little bit?
Some of our guides are just like master researchers, and they will just like they're always wandering town, and they'll just like message us on like the company Discord channel and be like, Wes, did you know that like what's something I found out the other day? I mean, it was like one of my guides that like really uncovered the story about the serial killer in Solvang,
Oh,
and he had just done all this research and was like, hey, I found this really cool story about the serial killer. Is it okay if I share that? I'm like, yes. Like, absolutely. Like, yeah, people love true crime. It happened here. We literally walk by the restaurant that his parents owned that he used to work at. in between murdering hitchhikers. Like, yeah, like we got
Wow.
to tell the story.
Yeah.
So, I have some of my guides are always just coming up with new stuff like that. The other thing that we'll always add to tours is just sometimes people walking by on the street will be like, "Oh, are you talking about this place? Oh yeah, I used to work here. Yeah, it's haunted. Let me tell you the story about the, old lady that we'd see." Or people on our tour will have things happen or will experience stuff. And so I always like to add those moments into the tour. And just our guides will say, "Hey, even if you didn't see anything in here, let me tell you that last week when we were walking by this building, we saw the woman wearing this blue Victorian gown with the blue hat at the corner. And our group went running to like try to see her, and she ducked around the corner and vanished."
That really
You know,
happened?
yes, that actually happened on the tour after we had been describing this woman. It's like they all looked up and saw this like kind of misty woman standing there looking at them, and the whole group saw it. And it's like, again, not every night, do we have something like that happen, but if we can tell those stories and say, like, believe it or not, but this is what happened, those
Yeah.
moments are really cool.
How
Um,
often do you get somebody on your tour who will like turn in, like send you guys a photo after the fact and be like, "Oh my God, this happened," or like a
yeah,
EVP or something?
yeah, like every month, like we'll get a couple of those coming through, where they'll send us a photo that they took in the moment, and nothing looked, off about it. But then afterwards, like, is it just me or does that look like a face up in the window? We're like, yeah, that kind of looks like, the guy that ran the building in the 1800s or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's also like moments on the tour where people will just like call things out that like they couldn't have known. There's this one block in San Francisco where like we kind of stopped using tools there because we kept on contacting this spirit, and it was always, no matter which tool we used, it was always the same answers that we would get. So if we used the dowsing rods, we would say, "Are you a girl?" And it would move apart to say no. We'd say, "Are you a boy?" And it would always say yes, and it was always the same answers, like night after night, tour guide after tour guide. It was always this young boy who was on the block and couldn't leave because he was just kind of stuck there, and it seemed like he like was looking for his parents or something, and it was kind of sad.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of like stopped using tools and just kind of ignoring that, because it was like we were trying to help him and we couldn't. And then a few weeks later, our guide is thinking about that boy while she's telling this story, a different story. And then after she concludes, this lady in the back, who was kind of like a medium, she raised her hand and says, "What about the little boy?" And she goes, "Oh, I didn't mention a little boy." She goes, "No, you didn't mention him, but he's been standing next to you the whole time."
Eee.
Just like weird stuff like that happens. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, you know?
Yeah, that's crazy. Oh, so I'm curious about your LA tour. I was surprised to see that it was in Chinatown, or at least part of it is there. What made you not go with like the typical Hollywood stories?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in retrospect. Like, like our tour. I love our tour in Chinatown. I think it's like the coolest ghost tour in town because it's Chinatown. Is not a neighborhood that a lot of people go to. To answer your question, why I started here, because I think Chinatowns are really cool. I just think like the architecture is so immersive and cool. It just has this like really like magical vibe to it. I live in Chinatown, and I love the history of it. So it just felt like a cool place to bring more tourism and kind of like put it on people's map, because even a lot of like Angelinos and friends of mine that are from here are just like, "Oh, Chinatown, yeah, yeah, I have a friend that lives in Koreatown," and it's like, okay, those are not near
Not
each other
no.
whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of like locals just don't know where Chinatown is, which for the record is near downtown, between downtown and Echo Park.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's a cool neighborhood, and it has a lot of amazing history that I uncovered. And there's just so many other ghost tours in Hollywood, and I just didn't want to be like duking it out with 5 other companies there.
Yeah.
Plus, I went on a lot of those tours, and it just isn't really conducive to what we do, because our tours are so much about trying to contact spirits. And I like it to be a little bit quiet and really, where we can kind of like contain the energy and have it be this kind of calm, peaceful place where we're trying to contact things. And the joke that we always make is like, it's really hard to be contacting a ghost when like a Michael Jackson impersonator like moonwalks through the group in the middle of it. It kind of like ruins the vibe a little bit. So
Yeah.
I just don't think that using the tools would be as successful, and we'd actually have as many ghostly moments, in a really busy place like that.
Yeah, no, I like that it's in Chinatown because it's something so different. Like when I looked up where the tour went, I was very surprised because I'd never even heard that there was a tour there before,
Yeah.
and how unique that is,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially for
It's a fun
LA, you
neighborhood.
know?
Yeah. The other place I kind of like designed a tour through like Olvera Street and La Plaza and that whole area and Union Station. So I have like a whole route there, which is, in my opinion, probably the most haunted neighborhood in Los Angeles, because it's the oldest and there's just a lot of stuff there.
I
But it's
love that area. I love Olvera Street.
Yeah, it's really cool. But they do like lock it up pretty early every night.
Oh,
There's like fences on the side, and it just like wouldn't work to do a tour there. But like the Pico House, and some of these like old adobes on Olvera are just like incredibly haunted. I think Ghost Adventures has done some stuff there too. So in my dream world, it's like that's I talk about this at the convention at the my presentation, but like you have to find that balance of like where is actually the most haunted place and where are people willing to go and where can you get access to. And
yeah.
so for me, Chinatown ticked a lot of those boxes because it's like different. I think locals are more excited about our tour than a tour in Hollywood because Hollywood just feels touristy
Touristy,
and
yeah.
corny,
Yeah.
whereas this feels like a little more authentic. And they're like, wow, this is like well researched. We got a lot of locals in all of our cities that come on the tour, even people that don't care about ghosts, and they're like, that was a cool tour. Like I learned a lot of history, and for me that's like, I started this because of the history element more than anything. So I want them to skeptics to come on the tour and be like, that was cool, you guys are doing something right.
Yeah. You were talking about it a moment ago about like really wanting to contact on your tour, like contacting the other side and everything. And you mentioned at the beginning that you do a summonsing ritual. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to have like a summoning spell. I'm like, this might get our groups like, minds like in the right headspace to kind of like be attuned to looking for things. And maybe like just setting our intentions, I think is helpful when you're doing any investigating, to just say like, hey, we're coming here with just, peace and goodwill. And we just want to, contact you because we're curious to hear your stories. And we're not like antagonizing you. I think on some of the ghost hunting TV shows, for example, there's a lot of like poking at the ghosts and like, angering them. And like, that's not, if I were a ghost, I don't think that's how I would want people to be talking
Yeah.
to me. So we try to come with like a really like respectful energy. And yeah, I just found this like spell one time and I was using it, but it was more in the vein of like taunting ghosts to show up if you're real. And like I used that spell for 3 tours, and like every tour something weird and bad happened.
Oh,
Like really loud like shrill noises were just like happening like throughout the tour, like 3 nights in a row, that I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. This guy on the tour, like a dad of a family, got kicked in the back by some force and like knocked over and like tripped and fell. And he was like, something kicked me. And I pulled his wife aside and was like, is he kind of like a jokester? Like, is this something he would do to scare his kids? And she's like, that is very out of character for him. And like, I could see that he was actually really scared. And so I took this spell to my friend whose mom is a medium, and I was like, can you show this to your mom and like see what she has to say? And her mom looks at it and says, I would never say these words again on your tour if I were you. She says, I have written you this speech instead, which I think is going to be a lot more effective to not having ghosts try to mess with you.
yeah.
And so that's kind of the spell that we've been using ever since.
Oh, good. Do you guys use any kind of closing thing too, a protective thing when you're leaving?
Yeah, we do two things. We have a kind of a closing spell that just kind of closes off the space and says like, thank you for joining us, enjoy the rest of your night. We're going to be going our separate ways now, to just kind of like let anything know to not attach themselves. And then in a few different like cultures, there's a ritual around having loud noises that kind of dissipate energy and like scare off any negative spirits.
Oh.
And so we always pass out those little pop fireworks to everyone on the tour. And
Ah.
that's kind of like a nice closing ritual where we hand those out, and then, on the count of 3, we all throw them down, and it makes this kind of loud noise. And that for us kind of like clears out whatever might still be there, and, kind of wraps up the tour.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, and like Chinese culture, Jewish culture, there's like kind of this idea or concept of like loud noises dissipating things. So we like it.
Yeah.
It kind of ties in thematically, and it's fun to, everyone likes fireworks.
Yeah, those are fun. Will you tell me like one ghost story from the LA tour?
So one of my favorites is this old building. It's called Capitol Milling, and it's an old flour mill. And the building is still there, and it's it was the oldest and longest running family owned business in LA. With a bunch of hauntings inside of it. Probably the most well documented of these was that the accountant of the company, the company was going into this like all these financial issues in the early 1900s, and the accountant just started getting overwhelmed. Goes to the president, Jacob Lowe, and is like, "Hey, our company is going down." And the president basically says, "I don't want to hear any negative words about it. You're the accountant. You fix our numbers." The accountant hears that his son is dying of this rare disease. He stays late one night at the office. He starts drinking. He takes morphine. He overdoses at his desk, and the coroner rules it a suicide. They're like, "There's no way you could accidentally do this to yourself." His body is found there. President Jacob Lowe takes this really personally because he was a good friend of the guy, and eventually starts having his own health issues and decides to end things there. So he tells everyone in the office to leave early that day. He locks himself in his office, rummages through his son's desk, pulls out a revolver, and puts it to his head and pulls the trigger, and somehow misses. And the foreman of the building hears this gunshot, comes running upstairs, looks in through the window, and sees President Lowe getting ready to shoot again. He's calling out to him, trying to get him to stop. He can't. He watches President Lowe put the gun into his mouth and pull the trigger. And this all happened inside of the building. And the place ends up shutting down. It's, later on. And it's just kind of like looming over Chinatown. It's this big kind of creepy empty warehouse. It says Capitol Milling on the side. And so a lot of people think there's like some kind of, residual impressions there. We've talked to construction workers because they ended up doing all this work to renovate it. It was supposed to reopen as like a big food hall. And the opening date was set for like March 2020. And so that ends up not happening. And it's still sort of in this like limbo space, 4 years later. But construction workers like have told us stories like walking by, like, yeah, we've had weird things happen. We've heard gunshots and felt like, energy in certain places throughout the building. And just the fact that like it still can't reopen and, hasn't turned into something like is more evidence of the curse. Yeah, there's other stuff that happened in the building too that we talk about on the tour that's extra creepy. So
Yeah.
that's one
Wow. I
story.
didn't know that story at all.
Oh, one thing, another cool thing about our tour in Chinatown is that it wasn't always Chinatown. It was Little Italy before that. And so like we have a story about like the mafia when they used to rule that neighborhood. And then before that, the fact that Capitol Milling was there, or there was an old train yard there, and this old Victorian house run by this French immigrant, it's called the Fritz House, which is like a really haunted Victorian house on the street. It's like, it's not just a tour of Chinatown history. It's like early Los Angeles history through all these different groups, which is really fun to uncover.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you do a tour in Temecula as well?
Yep, we do.
Tell me about I've never been to Temecula, I don't think. Tell me
Yeah,
about
it's like
Temecula.
so it's a wine region. Like Temecula Valley is like a amazing award-winning winery area, with this super creepy old historic downtown, Old Town Temecula. So a lot of buildings from like the 1800s, early 1900s there. It was like an old train town, basically. It was like, a train would stop there on the way up to LA. And so that's kind of what put it on the map originally. But a lot of great history there, just like very Wild West feeling, it still has all these like old like wooden buildings. You could just, feel like the saloon doors, you could like kick them open kind of vibe. So that tour is like very much like our like cowboy tour. There's a story about like a bank robbery there that, was botched. There's a blacksmith that like murdered his wife, and we like walk through the grounds of the old blacksmith shop. Potentially the most haunted hotel in all of California is located right there, called the Palomar Inn. And there's another haunted hotel. There's this old like kind of brothel casino place where this big shootout happened that ended up killing the sheriff. So a lot of like those types of real Wild West stories are what we talk about there. And yeah, it's a tour that when we started it, we weren't even getting any EMF activity, but like the more that the tours have gone on, it feels like we're sort of like unlocking some energy there because suddenly, like in the last few months, our guides have been getting a lot of really creepy stuff happening on the tour and like answers through the spirit box and really like making contact with things that wasn't happening before.
Well, do you think, because I've thought about this before, I feel like, we have to learn how to use these tools, the K2 meter, the dowsing rods and everything. And don't you think that like the other side too, like they've never seen these before and it takes them a minute to like learn as well? That if
Yeah.
if you go somewhere that isn't heavily already investigated and you bring these new tools there, it might take the other side a minute to be like, "Well, what is this? And how does this work?"
For sure, yeah. I mean, like if you're talking to someone from the 1800s, like they're not going to know what these digital devices are. So,
Yeah.
we always try to like explain how to use them. Hey, if you're here, feel free to just talk to us, and tell us your name. Or, I think sometimes the old school tools are sometimes more effective, like dowsing rods, where it's like, hey, if you want to talk to us, just, make these cross to say yes and make them move apart to say no, and you can just kind of like explain what's happening. But, I think to your point, there's, it makes sense that it might take some warming up. And also spirits might see us and be like, who is this guy? Why is he trying to talk to me right now? But after a while, it's like, oh, you're the guy that comes by that wants to like share my story and keep my legacy alive. And that
Yeah.
can feel really cool and, important to people potentially.
Yeah. Did I see a mention of a Monterey tour?
Yeah, we've like created a Monterey tour. We haven't launched it yet, but my parents live in Monterey and my brother does. And so they've been like, hounding me to start a tour up there. And I ended up doing a lot of research and basically put the whole tour together. But yeah, we haven't launched it officially yet.
Would that be on Cannery Row or?
It's going to be in this area called Old Monterey,
Okay.
which is like all these old adobe buildings from like the Mexican era of California. Like the first, a place called Colton Hall is there, and just like a lot of like old, yeah, it's like the oldest neighborhood in town, and it feels very historic and creepy and old. And there's so much documented stories there. I guess they're all on my bookshelf over there, but like there's like 8 or 10 books that have been written about the ghosts of Monterey. So
Wow.
that was like that tour like kind of writes itself because you're just like, okay, you can just like pick through, 50 different amazing stories and choose your favorite 10 for the tour. So that one's
That's
been
cool. Yeah.
pretty fun.
How do you pick your tours or like the cities that your tours are going to be in? Like, is it because you have a connection there or what do you look for?
Yeah, sometimes a connection like Monterey or SF or LA. Like, when I moved down here to LA for my music, I wasn't planning on starting a ghost tour, but then I just really fell in love with Chinatown history and was like, oh, this would be such a cool ghost tour. Like, why not? I can just, walk down the hill and lead the tour and hang out with people. It sounds great.
Yeah.
And then since being in LA, taking more road trips around, going to Solvang, I was like, oh, this is an amazing town. It's creepy. There's so much history here and there's nothing going on. Like, they would love a ghost tour. And so, in Temecula, kind of the same thing. We're like, okay, this is like a big, weekend getaway for people from San Diego and LA. There's a lot of history here as well. This seems like, and yeah, it's just like a creepy place with some documented hauntings. Those are all things that for me are kind of green flags for starting a tour.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a couple other cities that are sort of on my radar for starting tours, but generally it's like the mix of actual haunted history and where do tours go? Like where do you have enough people to sustain a tour?
Yeah.
And honestly, like somewhere like Lodi, like it's not like it's not like on a lot of people's radar, but there's a lot of people that live in that area that like might be really excited about it. And what we found for the Solvang tour is like locals are coming on the tour a lot. So like, oh, this is the new thing to do that we've heard about. So
Yeah.
potentially, even if it's not like a huge, destination, it could work. Granted, I know Lodi is becoming like more and more of a wine place too.
Mhm.
So I don't know. That could be cool.
Yeah. I mean, even if it was just a temporary one, like just did it like 4 weekends in October to start out or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it could be fun. And I feel
Yeah.
like
That'd be
I'm
cool.
I'm the girl to do it because I'm the weirdo that left and is doing spooky stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. Nice. Yeah. Let's talk. If you want some support on that, that'd be cool.
I do. Well, I have a question that kind of relates to that too. Have you ever been told by somebody, I don't want you telling that story about my business or my house or, my like asking to be left out of it?
Yeah, I would say like the biggest thing like issue that we've run into is like when it comes to telling like Native American history on the tour.
Hmm.
And so with our tour in Solvang, like we posted it online and then someone from the Chumash tribe reached out to us and said, "Hey, we just want to make sure that you're being respectful about our history and not sharing our history on the tour. We don't like believe in like ghosts in the same way that like Western culture does." So we're like, okay, let's not tell that. That's not our history to tell. Or like there was someone on a tour once that like we were telling a true crime story that was like recent, and this person like knew the person was like, "Hey, I'd like you to not be telling this detail." We're like, okay, that's reasonable. It's like at the end of the day, like we want to make sure that the communities and like locals coming on the tour seeing it aren't are happy about what we're doing. And
Yeah.
we're telling dark history and sometimes it's creepy, but like we also want to be respectful to the dead and to the living as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I know we're getting close on time. I just have a few roundup questions for you. The scariest paranormal place you have ever been?
I would say the Queen Mary was probably the most like haunted feeling place that I've been to.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it was like scary, but it was definitely like energetic, and
Mhm.
I definitely experienced a lot there.
Tell me
Or I
something
would say,
tell me something you experienced on the Queen Mary.
well, yeah, the Commodore Everett, I think is his name. He
Yeah.
was like walking me around, and I like had all my gear with me, and I was like, "Hey, is there anything like?" I was asking him all the ghost stories that he could share with me, and then I was like, "Where am I going to start getting energy?" And he says, "Well, a lot of people feel it, right near like this room over there." And then like I looked down, and my EMF just started spiking, and I was like, "Okay." It's like he knows where the energy is, and that's where I started experiencing it myself.
Yeah.
Um, but the scariest, actually, now that you mention it, I would honestly say the Haunted Museum, Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know if have you been there yet?
Yes, I have.
Okay,
A
cool. It's
while
just like,
ago. It's been a while.
yeah, it's like it's just like a numbers game. Like when you load up one building with that much creepy, cursed objects, haunted things, it's like obviously you're gonna feel energy there.
Yeah.
So I would say like that was the place where like I felt most like physically ill. I felt like sick and like like nauseous in like certain rooms. Yeah, especially like near like some of like the medical stuff, like the Dr. Kevorkian area. It was like a lot of like me and a couple other people were feeling like really queasy. And yeah, I think just like there's something about being in that like old creepy building and
Yeah.
being surrounded by cursed objects that feels extra spooky.
Yeah. Um, what's your favorite paranormal tool to use besides yourself?
I would say, well, let's see. I love dowsing rods because they're easy to explain and like easy for people to kind of like get a grip on how to use them and start getting answers. But I love a spirit box because you can really like pull out a whole story from it occasionally. Like we'll be using it and like we'll say like, what's your name? And sometimes it'll tell us their name. How old are you? It tells us their age, or like, why are you here? And you'll hear certain words from that. And you can kind of like get like a whole well-rounded picture of this person and like why they're in that area. So for that reason, like I think spirit boxes and just like the effect of hearing this like radio white noise static coming through this little box, and then the static will just stop and then someone will talk to you. Like that's like a really magical moment on the tour.
Yeah,
But yeah, I love that one.
definitely. Best evidence you've ever captured?
It's so funny, like a lot of stuff we don't capture on the tour, but we all experience it, and like it lives on as a story that we have. I'm trying to think. I'm sure like we've got some like EVPs that we've recorded that are really cool. But I would say like the most like undeniable ghostly things that have happened on the tour. Like let's see. Well, there was a tour where like we had where this was in San Francisco. We were like looking up at this like haunted bell tower where like some woman had like jumped to her death from it before, and everyone that had like it's on like this old campus called the San Francisco Art Institute, and like students would get like hired as like the overnight guard to live in the bell tower, and like everyone that like lived in the bell tower had like horrendous ghostly encounters. And so we were just standing there like looking up at this like trying to see if there's anything there. 'Cause sometimes we would catch like glimpses of what looked like a woman up there. And then these three ladies on the tour that were not related, they did not come with the same group. They were all with different groups, and they were all scattered throughout the tour. Like they were all in separate places. At the same moment, all three of them just screamed. And like, it's like at the exact same moment. It's not like they could have looked at each other and been like, 1, 2, 3. It's like they all just screamed without knowing it. And then they all looked at the rest of the group and said, did you all hear that? And we're like, what? And these three ladies, they all said, the old woman. And like, they all were in different places. And they all heard an old lady whispering into their ear at the exact same moment. And no one else on the tour heard it. And like,
Ooh.
that was one of those moments where it's like, you can't prove this, you can't prove that they weren't like in cahoots, but it's like, well, they didn't come with each other. I never saw them all talking to each other to organize anything like that. And the fact that they all heard this and no one else did, it was like, what was that,
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Well, I don't know. It's like, weird things like that happen on the tour. And for me, like that's evidence that, I'm like, I can't prove that, what happened, but I know it was weird and we've never had anything like that before. And I've never heard of that being like like something you could do to trick people. So,
Right.
you know,
I know you talked about the firecrackers, but do you carry anything else for protection?
um, no, not generally. Like, we sometimes will carry like amethyst. Like I've given like most of our guides like amethyst just as like a protective stone. My rule is like I generally try to not use any of my tools inside of my house. I just like I'll like keep them off just because I don't want to be like indicating to any spirits that like I want them to be showing up here. So,
Yeah.
after kind of like closing the tour, we just kind of like keep everything turned off and try to like not bring energy home. And I do think that I did bring like a couple ghosts into my old apartment, and we like it was like kind of creepy for a while. Like all my roommates could like hear something like stomping around upstairs in like our house and like this went on for like a week. And it was pretty disturbing, and then eventually it just kind of like faded out. But I was like using the tools and turning them on in the house around that same time, and like they're convinced that I brought something home, which could be the case.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe. Okay, last one. Paranormal place that you haven't been but are dying to go to.
I would say Edinburgh, Scotland.
Yeah.
One of my tour guides ended up moving there, and now leads ghost tours there.
No
And
way.
another one of my guides is there right now, going on all these ghost tours. And I think just getting into like a really, really old city, there's just so much energy that is just amassed over like the hundreds and hundreds of years. I need to go there, and I would love to see my old tour guide leading a tour in a new city where she could just like, surprise me with stories that I've never heard before. So I think that'd be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I want to plan a trip there too, so I might have to contact you and find out who the tour
Oh,
guide
nice.
is.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I just got all of her tour info for my guide that's there now, so I could send that to you.
Awesome. Well, Wes, thank you so much. This has been so much fun to chat with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was a blast to talk about, and hopefully some of your listeners will show up and check out the haunts in one of our cities.
Yeah, before you go, tell everyone listening how they can follow you or your company on social media and book tours and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's just thehauntghosttours.com. And we're on Instagram and TikTok. We're posting all the time, the Haunt Ghost Tours. So follow along there and come out and check out a tour.
Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Ghost Bunny podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on my spooky adventures, and I look forward to sharing a new ghost story with you each week. Please subscribe to our podcast so you're always the first to know when a new episode is out, and follow us on social media at Ghost Bunny Podcast on Instagram for photos and sneak peeks, and at Ghost Bunny Podcast on YouTube for the video version of this podcast. Bye, guys.